Chapter 3, Part 8. The first requirement is that these codifications must necessarily represent situations familiar to the individuals whose thematics are being examined, so that they can easily recognize the situations and thus their own relation to them. It is inadmissible, whether during the process of investigation or in the following stage, when the meaningful thematics are presented as program content, to present pictures of reality unfamiliar to their participants. The latter procedure, although dialectical, because individuals analyzing an unfamiliar reality could compare it with their own and discover the limitations of each, cannot precede the more basic one dictated by the participant's state of submersion, that is, the process in which individuals analyzing their own reality become aware of their prior distorted perceptions and thereby come to have a new perception of that reality. An equally fundamental requirement for the preparation of the codifications is that their thematic nucleus be neither overly explicit nor overly enigmatic. The former may degenerate into mere propaganda with no real decoding to be done beyond stating the obviously predetermined content. The latter runs the risk of appearing to be a puzzle or a guessing game. Since they represent existential situations, the codifications should be simple in their complexity and offer various decoding possibilities in order to avoid the brainwashing tendencies of propaganda. Codifications are not slogans. They are cognizable objects, challenges towards which the critical reflection of the decoders should be directed. In order to offer various possibilities of analysis in the decoding process, the codifications should be organized as a thematic fan. As the decoders reflect on the codifications should open up in the direction of other themes. This opening up, which does not occur if the thematic content is either too explicit or too enigmatic, is indispensable to the perception of the dialectical relations which exist between the themes and their opposites. Accordingly, the codifications reflecting an existential situation must objectively constitute a totality. Its elements must interact in the makeup of the whole. In the process of decoding, the participants externalize their thematics and thereby make explicit their real consciousness of the world. As they do this, they begin to see how they themselves acted while actually experiencing the situation they are now analyzing, and thus reach a perception of their previous perception. By achieving this awareness, they come to perceive reality differently. By broadening the horizon of their perception, they discover more easily in their background awareness the dialectical relations between the two dimensions of reality. By stimulating perception of the previous perception and knowledge of the previous knowledge, decoding stimulates the appearance of a new perception and the development of new knowledge. The new perception and knowledge are systematically continued with the inauguration of the educational plan, which transformed the untested feasibility into testing action, as potential consciousness supersedes real consciousness. Preparing the codifications further requires that insofar as possible they should represent contradictions, inclusive of others which constitute the system of contradictions of the area under study. As each of these inclusive codifications is prepared, the other contradictions contained therein should also be codified. The decoding of the former will be dialectically clarified by the decoding of the latter. In this connection, a very valuable contribution to our method has been made by Gabriel Bode, a young Chilean civil servant in one of the most significant Chilean governmental institutions, the Instituto de Desarrollo Agropecuario, acronym INDAP. During his use of this method in the post-literacy stage, Bode observed that the peasants became interested in the discussion only when the codification related directly to their felt needs. Any deviation in the codification, as well as any attempt by the educator to guide the decoding discussion to other areas, produced silence and indifference. On the other hand, he observed that even when the codification centered on their felt needs, the peasants could not manage to concentrate systematically on the discussion, which often digressed to the point of never reaching a synthesis. Also, they almost never perceived the relationship of their felt needs to the direct and indirect causes of those needs. One might say that they failed to perceive the untested feasibility lying beyond the limit situations which engendered their needs. Bode then decided to experiment with the simultaneous projection of different situations. In this technique lies the value of his contribution. Initially, he projects a very simple codification of an existential situation. He terms his first codification essential. It represents the basic nucleus and opens up into a thematic fan extending to auxiliary codifications. After the essential codification is decoded, the educator maintains its projected image as a reference for the participants and successively projects alongside it the auxiliary codifications. By means of the latter, which are related to the existential codification, he sustains the vivid interest of the participants who are thereby enabled to reach a synthesis. The great achievement of Gabriel Bode is that, by means of the dialectics between the essential and the auxiliary codifications, he has managed to communicate to the participants a sense of totality. Individuals who are submerged in reality, merely feeling their needs, emerge from reality and perceive the causes of their needs. In this way, they can go beyond the level of real consciousness to that of potential consciousness much more rapidly. Once the codifications have been prepared and all their possible thematic facets have been studied by the interdisciplinary team, the investigators begin the third stage of the investigation by returning to the area to initiate decoding dialogues in the thematic investigation circles. These discussions, which decode the material prepared in the preceding stage, are taped for subsequent analysis by the interdisciplinary team. In addition to the investigator acting as decoding coordinator, 2 other specialists, a psychologist and a sociologist, attend the meetings. Their task is to note and record the significant and apparently insignificant reactions of the decoders. During the decoding process, the coordinator must not only listen to the individuals, but must challenge them, posing as problems both the codified existential situation and their own answers. Due to the cathartic force of the methodology, the participants of the thematic investigation circles externalize a series of sentiments and opinions about themselves, the world, and others that they perhaps would not express under different circumstances. In one of the thematic investigations carried out in Santiago, a group of tenement residents discussed a scene showing a drunken man walking on the street and 3 young men conversing on the corner. The group participants commented that the only one there who is productive and useful to his country is the Susé who is returning home after working all day for low wages and who is worried about his family because he can't take care of their needs. He is the only worker. He is a decent worker and a Susé like us. The investigator had intended to study aspects of alcoholism. He probably would not have elicited the above responses if he had presented the participants with a questionnaire. He had elaborated himself. If asked directly, they might even have denied ever taking a drink themselves. But in their comments on the codification of an existential situation they could recognize, and in which they could recognize themselves, they said what they really felt. There are 2 important aspects to these declarations. On the one hand, they verbalize the connection between earning low wages, feeling exploited, and getting drunk as a flight from reality, as an attempt to overcome the frustration of inaction, as an ultimately self-destructive solution. On the other hand, they manifest the need to rate the drunkard highly. He is the only one useful to his country because he works, while the others only gab. After praising the drunkard, the participants then identify themselves with him as workers who also drink, decent workers. End of Chapter 3, Part 8.